How many premiums should you put in your FPL team? Hi everyone, welcome back to Hoopsa. FPL 23-24 has been live for a few weeks now, and if you're anything like me, you've probably been for 100 drafts already. One of the key questions ahead of game week 1 is how many premium players you should have in your team. If you're new to FPL, premium players are generally the highest cost players in each position. In this video, I'm going to be talking through team drafts with 1, 2 and 3 premiums. For each option, I've come up with 3 different drafts which I've ranked from bronze to gold. It's worth noting that Haaland is in every draft, whether that's 1 or 3 premiums, and that's just because you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're going without him. As usual, if you like the video, please like and subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments. So let's start off with 1 premium. Now for me, when I was putting this video together, the thing I found interesting is it's not so much about the premiums themselves, but the rest of the budget that you have available to you after you put your premiums in. And that's really what makes the difference from team to team. Going with just 1 premium allows you to have a really well-rounded, balanced team. I had a tough time even ranking the premium selections from bronze to gold because these are all pretty balanced teams. So starting off with bronze, despite the fact that this is my bronze pick, I really like this draft. Going with 1 premium allows you to really pack out the midfield. Just look how strong that is. All of these midfielders are proven, they get goals and assists, and they're going to make up for that lack of goals and assists that you have up front with just playing Haaland. And they're going to make up for the lack of goals and assists you're missing from playing a second or third striker. In defence, we've got Estupiñán and Shaw, who are both attacking defenders, which is really what you want. And then we've also got Gabriel, who I think is the best of the Arsenal picks right now. Ben Mee is also a good cheap option at 5 million. He was one of the top defenders last season. And the extra cash that having just 1 premium allows has also allowed me to pick a 5 million keeper. Of course, the downside of this draft is the bench. You don't necessarily need 15 well-rounded players who are all going to be suitable for you, because you'll be spreading your budget too thinly. But the issue is, if any of these players don't make the starting 11, you've not really got any viable options to come off the bench. Now looking at our silver draft, if we downgrade Raya to Pickford and Son to Maddison, it really allows us to strengthen the back line. We've now got Trippier in there at the back. Obviously he was the top defender last season. Not really a massive fan of Newcastle's opening fixtures and pretty tricky games, but they did give the top teams a really good run last season, so there's no reason why Trippier can't get returns in these games. Pickford is our goalkeeper. I don't mind the look of those opening Everton fixtures, and despite the fact that they had a really poor season last season, Pickford was in the top 3 for saves. As we said, Maddison is our cheaper swap for Son. I'm expecting with the money that they've spent on him, he's going to be a pretty focal figure in that midfield, and it gives us a chance for assists for Son, Kane, Kulusevski. Really like the strength of the back line in this draft. They've all got home games in the first game week, but again, we don't really have a bench here. So finally, our gold premium draft. This draft for me was all about bringing in another striker, so I've gone for Gabriel Jesus. Arsenal have great opening fixtures, and I really think you'll want to triple up there. I swapped out Odegaard for Mitoma in order to free up the funds for Jesus, and it still allows me to have the 3 Arsenal players. Mitoma had a great season and has got some good fixtures, so he feels like a good pick at 6.5 million. I've downgraded the defence a little bit here, taking out Trippier, but as I said, some tricky opening fixtures for Newcastle, so I don't mind too much not having him included at the start. And the beauty of this draft, despite the fact that I think it's the strongest of the premium ones I've put together, is you still have a little bit of funds left to play with. So I've got Ben Mee as a £5 million defender on the bench, and he's a solid option to come in if anyone has to drop out of that starting 11. Right, moving on to 2 premiums. As I've said before, Haaland is a must-have, so this is all about who you pair up with him. Bronze and silver were pretty close here. In this draft, I brought in Salah as the 2nd premium. Obviously, Salah and Haaland are a combined 26 million, so you really have to make some sacrifices elsewhere in this draft. But I still think this has a great midfield. Of course, you can also swap Semenyo for me in this draft and play 4 at the back. I did have to go for some cheaper defenders to make this draft happen. Botman comes in at 4.5 million. I'm not so keen here as I was with Trippier. With Trippier, despite those difficult opening fixtures, you can still always rely on him to pick up an assist, a goal. With Botman, that's not so likely, and that's the case for the rest of this defence. They're not as attacking, which really is what you want from your FPL defenders. The other reason I've made this draft bronze is because of Salah himself. Now that might sound stupid given Salah ended the season as the highest FPL midfielder, despite it being a very average season for Liverpool. But there are a few things bothering me. For example, the fixtures. They've got Chelsea, Spurs and Newcastle all within their first 6 games. There's also the fact that Klopp started experimenting with a new formation towards the end of the season. And with Trent coming in with this inverted midfield role, other players playing a little bit more centrally, Salah was actually starved for chances a little bit towards the end of the season. Now that's ridiculous because Salah was obviously still scoring and assisting at the end of the season, but he was actually outscoring the chances that were presented to him. If Klopp continues in that vein, then Salah might not be such a sure bet at the start of the season. There's also the fact that Liverpool are bringing in new players, and you have to wonder whether the goals and assists might start to be shed out a little bit more. That said, he is one of the most reliable FPL assets you can have, and despite struggling at the start of the last season, his second half was brilliant. And at 12.5 million, if you don't have him at the start, it's going to be really hard to bring him in later on. You can always downgrade if you start with him, but you're probably going to have to reach for a wildcard if you want to bring him in a few games in. So in our silver draft, Kane is our second premium. The interesting difference here with Salah to Kane is that spending all of your budget up front really limits you in midfield. The reason for this is there aren't that many good picks below 6.5 million in midfield this season, whereas you can find some cheaper options in defence and even up front. That's why I've ended up with McAllister in this draft at 6 million. He was the best player I could find at that price, and even then I'm not really that keen because I think he's going to be playing fairly deep for Liverpool. And the midfield here is generally quite risky. I love Mitoma and Eze, but we can't be 100% sure that they're going to recreate their form from last season. So the lack of cheap midfield options is why I've pushed more of my budget into the defence. Estupiñán comes back into this draft and he gives us that attacking value that we were missing in the bronze draft. I've also got Tarkowski on the bench, who I think is actually a good sub option given Everton's opening fixtures. Kane had his best ever FPL season last year, scoring 263 points, which was just 9 points behind Haaland. He scored 30 goals and 9 assists last season, which was just 6 goals behind Haaland, and that was in a distinctly average Spurs side. I don't mind the opening fixtures either. Spurs face Arsenal away and Liverpool at home in games 5 and 6, but realistically Kane can score against anyone. Doubling up Kane and Haaland is obviously guaranteed goals and assists, and that can make up for the shortcomings in the rest of your team. And if Kane isn't working out and Salah is firing, then you've got a straight swap you can make there because you've already got the budget. The big question mark at the moment is whether Kane will actually be at Spurs or not. Now my gold draft here is pairing up Haaland and Trent. The beauty of using Trent as our second premium pick is he's actually a fairly cheap premium. He comes in at 8 million, which is obviously the most expensive defender, but that's 4.5 million cheaper than Kane or Salah, which you can use really well in the rest of your draft. So Trent comes in for sure. McAllister is replaced by Maddison, which I feel a bit better about. But the other massive benefit here is that you can bring in Jesus up front, so despite having 2 premiums, you've actually got another great striker up front with Haaland as well. Of course, the doubt here is whether Jesus is going to be able to stay fit. Obviously, he missed quite a bit of last season, but his goals and assists were actually good for the appearances that he did make. There is the possibility that the goals will be shared out a bit more with players like Havertz coming into the team, but I don't think he's a like-for-like choice for Jesus, so I think there's a fairly good chance he'll be starting a lot of games. Again, we've got Tarkowski as our bench option, which I don't mind at all. It gives us a little bit of depth in the squad. The negative here again for me is Liverpool's fixtures. I'm not crazy about them, and we just don't know how this Liverpool team's going to line up just yet. But Trent really did start to come into form at the end of the last season, and he could be really dangerous in this new inverted role if that's how Klopp continues to play him. He's also going to be very high ownership, so it could be a risk to start without him. I don't think this midfield is as strong as the silver or gold premium drafts, but I still really like this. So now on to our freemium drafts. These are obviously really tricky because you've really got to downgrade your teams elsewhere. In particular, I haven't been able to get any more than one Arsenal player into these drafts, and I haven't been able to get any United in. I think Arsenal you're going to want to triple up on, and I'm starting to sway towards the same for United, so that's not really ideal for any of these drafts. Our bronze freemium draft is made up of Kane, Salah and Haaland. In defence, we've downgraded Estupiñán to Dunk. I don't mind this too much. Dunk is a solid centre-back. He's pretty nailed on for Brighton, but of course you do lose the attacking value that Estupiñán has. I do like the fixtures though. Tarkowski and Botman come in as our cheap defensive options. Shaw is the only thing close to really an attacking defender. The midfield is also pretty risky here. Andreas is the only semi-decent player I could find below the 6 million mark, but I don't think he offers the same value as when he was a bit cheaper last season. Up front obviously looks super strong, and you've got Salah in that midfield who's going to get you goals and assists too. But as I've said, this draft completely lacks Arsenal and United. Our silver draft is Trent, Haaland and Kane. In this version we've lost Shaw to fit Trent in, but again there's the same issue, we don't really have any defensive prowess. The midfield's a bit more balanced with Maddison and Saka coming in, but the rest are all sort of 50-50s as to whether they're going to be able to recreate that form. But obviously once again, Haaland and Kane speak for themselves. So finally, our gold freemium option. I think this is definitely the strongest backline of the freemium drafts. I like that Shaw and Trent are balancing out Botman and Dunk as our more traditional defensive options. I think the midfield is the strongest of the freemiums too. You've got Salah and Saka as pretty sure bets for points. Maddison too, I think is in that conversation. And then Mitoma and Eze are the more outside choices. And then Mitoma and Eze are there too for the slightly cheaper options, but should be promising from last season. Obviously in this draft we've just got Haaland up top, but I think the goals and assists that you'll get from Saka and Salah make up for that. The downside here is no bench, but that is the cost for a freemium draft. Right, so to wrap up, which is the best gold draft? Right now, I'd have to actually say the one premium gold draft is my favourite. Having just one premium allows you to do so much. We've got 2 attacking fullbacks and then a really solid option with Gabriel. And again, the benefit of one premium is just how much you can pack out that midfield. Rashford, Fernandes and Saka are all players that I'm expecting to get goals and assists. Maddison I'll be hoping can up his game now he's joined a stronger team, and Mitoma I'm really hoping carries on from last season as well. Haaland and Jesus feels like the best striker pairing at the moment and allows you that Arsenal triple up. And then we've also got me as a sub, which gives us a little bit of depth on the bench. The only doubt I have right now is going without Trent, especially if he stays in that inverted midfield role. You've essentially got an £8 million midfielder. There's also the fact that if Salah or Kane become must-haves, it's going to be really hard to get them in the team without a wild card, so that may impact my thinking ahead of my final draft for game week 1. Right, that wraps up today's video. Thank you very much for watching. If you like what you saw today, I'm going to be doing lots more FPL content over the summer, so make sure you subscribe to keep updated. See you next time.